Hello Internet! My name is SiLi and I made a remix of the tune called Let It Begin from Abstrakt Syntax and Minzo, featuring the lovely vocals of Lottie Woodward. I want to give you a little insight into how I worked on the project, what's going on a little bit with the tracks, and yeah, how it came about. Let's begin. Or shall I say, let it begin. Okay, so this is the session for Let It Begin, the remix. Let me just play a little bit so you can get a vibe of the tune. Okay, so I'm gonna focus on three main parts: the drums, the bass, and I guess the other instruments. When I work on tunes, it's pretty much always just a chaos and I never do things the same, but it still ends up sounding the same somehow. That's why I implement a lot of different sidechaining techniques or whatever. I just try to keep it interesting and change it around a bit now and then. But yeah, I really like the original tune. So when they asked if I could make a remix, I was agreeing because I like tunes with vocals and I really liked the chord progression in the tune. So the first thing I did was I sat on my MIDI controller or to my MIDI controller and in front of my MIDI controller, and then I played in I was basically transcribing the chords so I could play them back in. And the first thing I did is I added this intro synth, which is pretty close to the original one. It's just a basic saw wave with detuning and a little filter envelope. And also a little EQ going on there, just cutting off the lows. Then I did the same thing on the piano. So I think I first played the MIDI on the piano and then copied in to the synth. So and it's really mellow. And the piano I'm using is the Maverick in Contact. Added a little bit of tape saturation and a little bit of EQing going on, especially towards the drop part and other parts. I use a lot of EQs to cut away the lows for transitions, so you can build more contrast. Because if you take the bass away in front of a drop and then bring the bass back in on the drop, it's more of a contrast and more of an impact. Well, I guess we're starting with the instruments then. Then I took this little synth part, which without effects sounds like this, which was just a part of a stem they sent me. And I wanted to create like a, I guess like a phone call vibe. And then I added a lot of delay, which is just an echo from Ableton, and filtered out some harsh frequencies and also filtered out the delay in here. What I tend to use in Ableton when doing effects is I like to just create an effect rack and then add 2 parallel lines and have the second one 100% wet with the effect on it. So the way you would do this, like I have it set up so that if I grab an effect rack, it just puts in the effect rack with 2 chains on it, and then I can add effects or whatever. So I just saved the effect rack as a default preset with those 2 lines. Yeah, and this like goes out throughout the whole tune. And then I added some different parts as well. Well, the piano goes all throughout the tune pretty much. And then I have these strings right here, which are a labs preset, so it's frozen strings violin. I really liked those chords, so I guess I was like being in front of the MIDI controller again and trying to find good chords that fit. Yeah, then comes the second part with a little more cymbals. And then in the B part of the first drop, I added this pad right here. It's just a Omnisphere pad. And then with some replica, that's a delay from Native Instruments. I really like it. And it just adds a little bit to the vibe. And right here comes the vocal in. I wanted the tune to roll a bit more, I guess. So I took the vocal and repeated it all over again and just added some variation to it by using effects, because if I just had the vocal by itself repeating all over again, it would be kind of boring. So I added different filters and effects. I just shifted the format a little bit. And then some delay. I don't know what I'm doing with the manipulator. Oh, probably I use the manipulator a lot for the detuning, which is really nice. Oh, so I was straight up searching for 2 minutes where this filter motion came from, and I just, because at first I thought it was an envelope one, but it's the LFO right here that creates the little wobble thingy in the vocal. Yeah, and that's pretty much it for instruments. At the end of the first drop to the breakdown, there's again this little thingy. And then I bring in the vocal again. And added a little bit of the original stems with some effects on it. Also, I used little bits, probably of the vocal or with reverb on it, and then use that as a reverse riser right here for the second drop. Yeah, and then the second drop is a little darker. Also, it hits like a low B note, which is kind of, I guess, illegal. It's probably too low to play on most systems, so a couple of times people were like, "Oh, what's that? What's that? Why is the bass ducking on the second drop?" And I told them like, "Oh, it's a lower B, which is not gonna play on most systems, but like most headphones can play it, like the AirPods Pro and whatever headphones people are using nowadays should be able to play that lower B note." Yeah, and for some reason I have the bass of the second drop only in a bounced version. I think it's because I checked the different versions of the tune, and I guess I messed something up in a version in the new version, and then I had to re-render it. Like I couldn't find the mistake, and then I bounced it out from an old project, and that's why I called this a bass. But how though? So that's the bass of the second drop right here. Speaking of bass, let's switch to the bass. Well, this one is just yeah, a bounced audio file with a multipass on it, which like distorts a little bit of the mids. So I have like 3 main layers going on. Well, I guess 2, because these are just for the second drop right here. In the first drop, I have 2 main layers. This one, as you can see, is just the harmonics. It's just a serum patch with a little bit of movement. Lately, I really like to do most of the work by synthesis, so for drums and for bass or whatever. So instead of like distorting a sine wave to get the harmonics, I like to add them in by hand. You have more control that way. But yeah, and the first layer right here, this one we can ignore. The first layer is probably the rest. So right here I can see it's 3 layers, and the first layer has 3 layers in itself again. That's probably because I had to set up some different instruments for different octaves because it was messing up a bit. But the main thing is a serum patch with 2 oscillators. I really like the saw rounded to square waveform. And then on the second one, it's just a sine wave. Both are tuned down 2 octaves. And then I distort it a little with tube distortion. And yeah, just some basic EQing right here. Nothing special. Again, just some movement with the LFO2. It's controlling the frequency of the distortion. And then I have a lot of post-processing going on. I'm not gonna go into what all of this is, because most of the times I just experiment with distortion and EQing and doing parallel stuff. So that's probably what I did right here. Second layer of the main bass. It's just a massive one. It's an old preset I made, I guess. Basic rees, 2 oscillators, one tuned a little bit up, one tuned a little bit down, and then another one for the sub, or just a clean one, I guess. But maybe I'm not using this one. Looks like I'm not using this one. But then again, a ton of effects on it. Basses tend to sound more interesting if you use effects like a phaser, flanger, even multiple of them. And yeah, the rest is just gain staging and distorting pretty much. And yeah, combined, it sounds pretty good, I guess, the bass. Let me check that I didn't. Oh yeah, right here. So this is how it sounds by itself, with the sidechain on it though. As you can see, I like to use a lot of processing also on group buses. Lately I like to use the trick of using a ring modulator with a sidechain input. So I guess, yeah, this one has a sidechain input. And then I feed the sub into it. So best case scenario, you just feed a really low, the lowest fundamental of the bass into your ring mod, and then use the input right here to. It's basically acting like amplitude modulation at this point. Whenever the sine wave of the sub is louder, the thing you put the ring mod on with sidechain input from the sub is going to be louder as well. So yeah, it helps to crunch up stuff. You can also do this by just feeding a really low subnote and another thing into distortion, and then you get the same thing. As for the sidechain setup, there's a lot going on right here. I'm sidechaining on different stages as well. I have different group buses, so the instrument bus is getting sidechained with the Pro C right here. And then I have like this main sidechain bus, which has a shaper box on it for some reason. And I'm triggering this shaper box with this trigger MIDI right here, and I have offset it to -15 milliseconds, so it grabs the sidechain grabs before the snare hits, so you get the full transient of the snare. And then yeah, that's it for sidechain setup. I've gone into sidechaining a lot of times in my streams. My number one tip is like use an oscilloscope to take a look at the waveform. You can use this free one called Signalizer. Just Google Signalizer VST and then you'll find it. And then there's an oscilloscope which is really high resolution, and you can see whatever's going on in the tune. You can even zoom in really far, really close, so you can see the transit of your snare and whatever's going on. And I really like the colors on this one, as well as the Oscillos Megascope. Really like this one as well. I use this one a lot to check the phase of the bass. There's also a low pass function right here. So it just shows you below 50 Hertz, for example. And then you can, like this one is my kick. Here you can see the snare hits, and then you can see the relation of your sub phase of the different instruments to each other. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the drums. As I said before, I like to use synthesis nowadays for drums because you have way more control over everything, and you can, like, instead of using a sample and then you have to use a transient shaper and compressors, I like to use synthesis mostly because then you can do just everything by envelopes and pitch envelopes, I guess. So for the kick, it's the main kick, the original kick from the song, but like just very heavily bandpassed. And then I added a kick 2 layer. I use kick 2 a lot, not just for drums, but well, not just for kicks, but also for snares and other transient hits for instruments even. Then I added a little bit of Saturn to give it some saturation, a little bit of transient shaping, a little bit of taking off the tops because those are probably being provided from other instruments. Like this one. So this is another layer called kick tops, and it's just a kick from a sample. That's probably one from Khan samples, and then I just took the tops right here. So, and I created another kick for the intro by itself because the one from the drop was probably like too long and too heavy, so I like to separate things like that. Well, there's a hat loop for some reason. Then there's a face plant, which adds a little bit of high end, I guess. I use face plant a lot for these kind of high end 16K interesting textures. So let's talk about the snare. Snare has, I think, 3 layers, these two, and then this snare add down here. Oh, that's actually a kick. my bad. So for the snare, we have these two layers right here. The second layer is just a sample from an Apache loop for some air. And then the main layer of the snare is a bunch of layers right here. This one is just sending out MIDI signal to sidechaining tools, shaper box right here. And then, as you can see again, kick 2 for the main body, probably. And then I have a layer called tone, which is a quarter tone sample. I really like the quarter tone snares because they have a lot of nice snare harmonics. Filtering it out with soothe. Yeah, as you can hear, that's the nice snare overtones. For some reason, I thought I had to get rid of those in this snare. And then there's a little bit of EQing going on. And some saturation at the end, which is on the whole instrument rack right here. And the middle snare right here is another snare I designed some time ago. But yeah, the main thing is this kick body right here. It's just a basic pitch envelope. And then the amplitude envelope looks like this. I added this disperser, which I have probably never done before. I'm wondering what that adds. Well, it doesn't do much, just a little bit of upper harmonics, I guess. Yeah, but that's the snare. If you're wondering what's inside here, it's just some EQing, more EQing, and then a little bit of sinoid fold saturation. There's the bongo layer. And then I have, in the second part of the drops, I added a little bit of more cymbals, as you can see right here, but the cymbals that go throughout the tune are right here. Well, it's the tops, which sound a little bit weird right now because the snare is not sidechaining into it. But yeah, it's different percussions and top loops and cymbals. And then I like to use denoise on cymbal layers. Like this one is the dry and this one is the denoise. A denoise, I like to use the denoise noise, I'm sorry. It's called denoise noise 2. You can use other stuff as well. You can just do this also in a vocoder from Ableton if you want to. Yeah, it just adds a little bit more crispiness to cymbals. Then in the second part, I have more cymbals right here. Just different breakbeats that are probably high passed. And then there's a little riser thingy before the drop right here. And that's pretty much it for the drums. Let's look at the drum bus. A little bit of compression going on, a tape saturator. Then again, like, as you can see, that's another, like, I called it noise inducer, because that's just the method I told you about, like, just like 1 minute ago. You just add a vocoder, take the high frequency band, if you have 12 bands, and then maybe a little bit of overdrive, and I spread the stereo signal a little bit right here. Then EQing, exciter, coffee pun, which is, I'm adding a little bit of 3K right here as it seems. And then a Pro C for compression, Saturn, and again exciter. Yeah, don't be imitated by these effects. I just, like I said, it's a lot of experimentation and different techniques. Just do whatever sounds good. Yeah, and then the vocal, I've left it pretty much intact. Let me see. Some basic EQing going on. Maybe there were some frequencies that I didn't like and I took them out. Some overdrive for a little bit more high end, probably. And then I like to use the Revival by Slate Digital. It's free. It's really nice for vocals and other stuff that you need high frequencies on. Like, check it out without it. It sounds... Yeah, it's much clearer with the Revival on it. So I really like to use it. There's other tools you can use, but this one is really solid. Also, I added thickness, which I never do, but for some reason it sounded good. You have to be careful though. Yeah, just be careful. Again, some basic EQing for whatever reason with the EQ8. And X-click because probably there were a little bit of clicks somewhere and I tried to get rid of them. Yeah, this little thingy right here is just another vocal part in front of the drop.
Taking control.
Yeah. Let's also talk about the screechy thing right here. Well, the screechy part of the bass is baked into the How Do track, so I can't really show you how I done it, but to be honest, it's just distortion and boosted EQ frequencies in the right spots, so there's a little bit of reverb going on, I guess. Yeah, it's the hybrid reverb right here in the return channel. And then I have this little second drop horn thingy, which probably is a part of the bass I made, and then I pitched it up, maybe. Maybe I pitched it before I bounced it right here. Yeah, it's part of the bass stem I bounced in place. And then a little bit of Raum. Really like this reverb as well. Let's take a look at the master chain. For this tune, I almost mastered it myself. Well, the final bounce came off of my PC, but I sent the master to Dustkey. He just pointed out one or the other thing, and then I implemented it into my own master, and so I could compare. And there's a lot more going on than I usually use. Okay, first up in the master chain, I have a Soothe. It's taking away some of the snare's frequencies. I probably tried to fix it in the mix, but it worked better on the master bus. Next up, just some gain staging, boosting 3 dBs. Then I have a Puig Tech. I find this one really useful for boosting the 10K region. Just subtle. Yeah, that's like really subtle, but it helps giving the tune some energy. And then I have an imager. That's spreading apart the highs a little bit. Yeah, makes it a bit wider. Then a standard clip. I'm clipping. That's mostly the drums that are being clipped right here. And I do that right before an equalizer. This one boosts the lows a bit. That was something Dustkey mentioned, and I agreed with it, so I'm boosting the lows just a little bit. This EQ takes away the side signal the lower frequencies in the side signal, leaves the mid signal alone. Mostly the bass gets a little bit more mono in the subregion with this. And then the last thing is a maximizer with just a little bit of threshold that cuts off some peaks. I have it mostly on the transparent setting right here. And I turn true peak limiting off because in some cases true peak limiting is actually not that useful. It's rather destroying the transients. So be careful especially in electronic music, be careful with true peak limiting because it might destroy your transients, but just listen to how your track sounds like, and especially your transients. And I have a little bit of dithering going on because it's like the last thing in the mastering chain. The rest is just analyzing plugins. Magic AB is for referencing. I reference different tunes directly in the DAW so I can switch between them and listen for what might not be good in terms of the mix sound with my song. And then oscilloscope, megascope, and signalizer, and a span. Always good for checking the frequencies. It's a free one. Also a free one is this monitoring one. It's from Air Windows. Air Windows has many great plugins. And this one is kind of a monitoring VST, so you can activate it. And then you have different types of outputs that it's gonna simulate. This one is 24-bit, 16-bit. I don't even know what some of these are. This one outputs the peaks. You can output the sub. You can output the mono signal, side signal. I don't even know what all of these are, but check it out yourself. It's very useful for checking your mixdown and mastering. So I hope you learned a little something from this breakdown. My feeling is just that I flew over the project and didn't really explain something, which is kind of the point of a breakdown. But if you want to know more about the tune, or if you want me to go into detail about something I did, you can ask me specifically via, I don't know, Facebook or SoundCloud or whatever, or Insta. And then, yeah, I'll answer it because I pretty much answer every message that I get. And yeah, I hope you liked the tune, the remix I made. And yeah, big shout out to Abstrakt Syntax and Minzo for making the tune, and also Lottie Woodward for the vocals. I hope you have a good week, or a good weekend if it's close to the weekend. And I guess see you in the next video I'll ever make, or at the next event I play at. Yeah, have a good one.